приветствовать в помещениях Международного академического центра «Вектор». Кто-то нас знает хорошо, кто с нами только еще знакомится. Я надеюсь, что это залог длительной большой дружбы в перспективе. Мы надеемся быть вам сегодня полезными. Мероприятие мы делаем практически по заявкам преподавателей района, которые хотели бы получить практику с носителями языка для совершенствования своей языковой речи. Как мы говорили в кулуарах, но все же лучшее детям, лучшее также и вам. Поэтому сегодня наши хорошие друзья, носители языка Эмили Зайковский, Энди Фредрикс будут работать с вами и для вас, а не для детей, как обычно. И они затронут в беседах и в своих материалах темы, которые касаются школы, естественно, школы США, потому что они знают лучше всего. И у вас будет сегодня одно занятие, такое лекционно-презентационное, но вы сможете задать все вопросы и пообщаться с Эмили по всем интересующим вас темам относительно жизни тинейджера в школе и дома в США. И Энди Фредрикс проведет дискуссионный клуб для вас, где вы также сможете в живом общении узнать что-то, пообщаться с носителями языка, попрактиковать свою речь. И потом, я надеюсь, что мы сможем привлечь ваше внимание к нашим официальным эксклюзивным партнерам Leeds English Language School, город Лидс, которые также будут с радостью поддерживать вас своими уникальными интерактивными материалами, если вас это заинтересует, и если подобная система преподавания вам будет интересна.
Public versus private, the way of the future. So what I would like to talk about is the difference between public and private schools, and what you guys think is better and what you think would be better for the country as a whole. So this can either be an interesting conversation or nothing will happen. But I don't know about, actually, I think it's also happening in Russia, but in the States right now, there's a big conflict, there's a big debate on whether we should stay with public schools or if we should completely move to private. Is this also happening in Russia?
Not exactly.
Not exactly. Well, what I've heard with Russia is that they just made a law trying to make all public schools private schools.
Maybe there was a tendency some 5 years ago, or
They tried.
they tried in the beginning, but they dropped the idea because maybe it's difficult to survive for public schools in such circumstances.
Well, but I mean, that's what I heard was that they no longer want public schools. They only want private. No.
We haven't heard of it.
The tendency is that they will grow, so they will appear in more quantities.
Private schools.
Private schools, yes, I've heard about it.
Okay.
Yes,
So, I
in
mean-
this country.
And then are they trying to copy America in a way, or
I
is
don't
it?
know what they are going to copy, yeah.
Okay.
But, well, I suppose that simply the country needs money. So that's why this is the reason of this tendency.
But I mean, okay. I mean, in the States, our country also needs money.
And who doesn't, I wonder?
Exactly. But then I would think though the country would get more money through taxes to pay for schools, and then they can just take it and put it somewhere else. But then what is happening in the States? So in the States, until the 70s, and actually I guess until 2 decades ago, most schools were public, and now they are starting to make a big change. And the excuse is because of the recession, and they say that they cannot pay public schools anymore. There's no more funding. But what it really seems to be is, so each state in America has its own curriculum. They decide what they want to teach. And of course, there are guidelines that the federal government gives, but each state decides.
Yes.
Yeah, and especially decides which special classes to use. But then what is happening now with the recession is that also usually the state taxes pay for the schools. But now most states do not have money, and so the federal government is stepping in. But then what the federal government is trying to do is put more people into private schools. But then lots of people complain because they do not have money for this. So then the federal government says, oh, we will give you a voucher. If you're poor, we will support you. And then with each private school, if a private school has enough vouchers, then the federal government starts to pay the private school. And so the federal government technically is now trying to take over public schools. Which, I mean, in Russia, is it one central, I guess, organization, or does each oblast, each city, have control over its own schools?
It's the question for administration. So.
It's a question for administration.
Not for the teachers.
Not for teachers. Fair enough. Well then, I guess, should we just, are any of you private school teachers or just all public school? Public? So then what do you think about private schools?
The level of education is much lower usually.
Is lower. Why do you think so?
The students who are coming to our school
All
from
this
yeah,
showed their lower level.
yeah,
Really?
compared to our
Yeah.
students. Yeah.
Really?
Their parents just pay money for their education in private schools. And so,
So the parents pay money, but nothing happens.
I think so.
Yeah. Fair enough. So I mean, in the States, that's what I guess another debate is usually the private school is better. I mean, there recently was a statistic that in public schools, I guess there's only about a 68% literacy rate when kids graduate. So only 68% of kids in public school can truly read. But then in private school, it's about 90%. And so, I mean, that's America though. And then, I mean, there was even a more ridiculous fact of, I guess, I think in the 80s, somebody made a survey in Soviet Russia and in America. And I think it was a survey, either the 70s or 80s. And about 70% of Americans, all Americans, were literate in the 70s. And they did the same survey in Soviet Russia, and it was like 95%. So I think your education system already is better. Was better.
Yeah.
So what's changed?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah, funding first of all, and maybe the level of teachers as well.
Really?
Yeah, because everybody started to teach everything without having any special education.
Okay.
Because there were times there was shortage of teachers, and everybody was invited to teach.
Really?
It was my case, so.
But usually, like, teaching is not, I guess, the most
Easy.
glamorous and easy of jobs.
But there wasn't any job at all, and then the only way to have something to do and
Was to teach.
to be paid was to teach
Okay.
someone else.
Fair enough. And then, so has that changed now? So in Soviet Russia, I mean, because like in the States, when you can go to university and you're taught to teach, and you're pretty much taught to teach everything. And then if you want to, I guess, become, better paid, you can then go on to, I guess, a master's degree in teaching and teach specific things. But in Russia, what do you guys do? Is it, when you go to university, do you study just how to teach, or do you study one specific field of teaching?
Pedagogical institute.
Yeah, but then so in this institute, do they teach you like do they teach you just how to teach English, how to teach history, or do they teach you how to teach everything?
Teach English, yes.
Just English.
Special, yes, education is given to those who are going to teach languages or history or things.
Yeah.
Just Russian language, the Russian language and literature.
And is this a new way, or did they do this in the past as well?
They did. They,
Okay.
yes, they did.
But then in the 90s, were things different?
Yeah. Everything was different.
Everything was different.
And everything was difficult, and life was very difficult. That's
Yeah.
why everything had changed.
Okay. But then, I guess going back to public and private schools, during the Soviet Union, did you have private schools?
No.
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 And then in the 90s?
They started
They
to
started.
teach in the 90s.
Okay.
In
Well,
South
like,
Russia, we didn't have any
alternative.
private schools, but education was much better.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I actually I believe it. I think there was lots of good things that came from the Soviet Union. And sadly it ended.
Mhm.
But
When private schools appeared, of course, our imagination was that those will be the schools, Eton, rugby, something like that.
But like what?
Well, very soon, great disappointment came.
yeah.
And now we see that the private schools are not those we thought about and we imagined
Yeah.
them.
Wait, have any of you been to, I guess, any of the schools in America or in England? Public schools, private schools? Australia. Did you notice the difference between public and private there?
I've been to, well, I've been told about the difference. The public ones are pretty much the same as ours now, so
Okay.
the similar system.
But what about private? Do they have better schools or worse schools?
Usually better, yeah.
Yeah. But so, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like in Russia, with private schools, they're there just to take money.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, in the States,
Most of cases.
I mean, in the States, I went actually, with my schooling, I went to several international schools, and they were private, but they're pretty much funded by the American government. And then in the States, I went to one private school and then several public schools. And there really isn't a big, in the States, there was not a big difference. I mean, you're more, it's more relaxing in a private school because there are less kids. But then with private schools, they're allowed to have, I guess, their own types of rules. And so some of those can be kind of interesting. Usually they're religious, and yeah, I'm not religious, so it's kind of strange. But with public, when it comes to the education, because it seems like in the last 2 decades, teachers have started to be paid less and less, and so pretty much every 5 years, our education gets worse and worse. The quality of education gets worse and worse. And actually, I wanted to ask you guys that, because even just coming from being in school and then seeing my brother graduate and then going to the States and just seeing what the kids are like now. Have you seen a change in Russia? Is the quality getting better or worse in Russia?
Quality of education
Yeah,
is getting worse.
it's getting worse.
Yeah.
Is there a reason behind that? Is it just because of funding, or?
Maybe one reason is lack of funding, and maybe there is a lot of other things. It's maybe difficult to discuss right now, and to I don't know. Maybe the social life is different.
You just mean more people are into
Because
gangsters
I mean, parents, they are very much involved in different activities. Maybe they are preoccupied of earning money, and they don't have enough time to be spent on their teachers. That's why maybe they're getting worse and worse. And
So
it's maybe it is becoming more difficult to teach them because they are not ready to get this knowledge.
Yeah, or they're just not ready to be people in
Be
society. I mean, in the States it also seems the same way. But it also, in the States, it's not just people want to make more money, it's actually harder for people to make money. And so instead of one job, a person might need 2, maybe 3 jobs. And so they're just not at home.
And the same is here.
The same in Russia?
Mhm.
Yeah. But then I guess that's the problem with public versus private, is that when it comes to private schools, you must pay. And it does, in Russia, do enough people have the kind of money to pay for a private school?
Not many.
Not many,
Not many, but enough.
but enough.
Enough.
Because I mean, like, I guess there's an argument in the States that they say the amount of money that people pay in taxes for education, you would actually pay less if you just went to private school. And I think that is a bunch of baloney. I think it's a big lie.
A bunch of
Baloney. Hot dogs, we call hot dog, the meat that a hot dog is, we call it baloney. So it's a bunch of baloney. It's a bunch of fake meat.
yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. And so it's more of, I guess, the conservatives trying to have us pay less taxes, and I guess have them pay less taxes. But, I mean, so, I guess I thought I knew what was happening in Russia when it came to this switch of private schools, but what is actually happening here? What's happening in Russia?
You mean private schools?
Yeah. So what I heard was that the country, they were going to try and, or I guess they were either going to try and make it fully private, or they were going to make, I think, 3 or 4 classes or subjects free, and then you had to pay for everything else.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah? How would that work? Do you guys know? Or is that for administration?
It will reduce the number of students in universities, so we'll have more workers at factories, possibly, yeah.
Okay.
Probably that's the idea of the government, probably.
Really? So you guys want, so that's an interesting twist, because in the States, we want less factory workers. But then, sadly, we have lots and lots of factory workers who might not even have a high school education. But now all of our factories are leaving America, and they have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have enough money to go to college, or they're too old to go to college, or they just think that they should not go to college. And so we have a very big problem when it comes to that. But fair enough. Do you guys want to talk about this? I actually have other things to talk about, but I was told to try and talk about public versus private. Because it's a very heated, I mean, if Russia went the way of private schools, what would happen to you guys? What would happen to public teachers?
We'll start working in
schools? Okay. One would hope.
Maybe we'll go to factories.
Or you will go to the factories? So Russia wants everybody to go back to the factories. Fair enough. That's horrible. But actually, technically it's not too horrible, because I just complain about this to my Russian friends, is that you guys need more industry in this country, and you need your own industry, instead of taking it from America or Europe. But I don't think, you don't need just workers, you need developers and creators, but that's why you still need schools. But I mean, actually, is the salary in Russia going up or down? Down?
No way.
We are told that it's going up.
You're told it's going up.
We are told.
Everybody's
We are told.
every day we are told that it is going on,
Are
but
going up.
But nothing really happens. Because I mean, in the States,
We are not sure.
well, at least it stays the same, yeah? In the States, it goes down and down and down. And so, I mean, that's a horrible thing that's happening in the States, especially with public schools, is that there's no money. And so, every year, schools close, and then so, more and more kids come to one school. I mean, actually,
The same with us.
yeah? Really?
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean,
So it
maybe,
is said that so small schools will be united with the larger ones, and well, the same process.
well, what's the average amount of, I think, Emily's actually going to be talking more about this, but what's the average amount of students in one class?
30.
About
30.
30. Yeah.
It should be 25.
Yeah.
But it's more than that.
Yeah. So it's about the same in the States.
30. Or, yeah, 25.
25? It should be 25.
Mhm.
Between
And then-
25 and 30.
Okay. And do you guys get teacher assistants? No.
Never.
So I mean, now in the States, I think the classroom should have 25, but it's between 30 and 45 kids.
But the language teachers are lucky because the class usually divides into two parts, and we usually have to teach only half of the class, so about 15 or 16
Yeah.
students. So we are lucky that our colleagues.
So that's why I hear more yelling in the other classrooms and not the language classrooms. Okay, I would actually prefer just
And
to...
what is Andy private to public schools rate in the USA?
You mean
I
tuition?
mean rate, well, the percentage of...
Percentage of kids.
No, I mean...
Correspondence.
No, the
I
rate,
mean the rating, so which are higher.
ratio public to
To
private schools in the USA.
Honestly, I have no
No
idea.
idea.
No idea. I mean, most kids go to
So
public
10, maybe 10%
Well,
private schools,
something
10%,
like that.
something like
Yeah,
that.
it's not many.
Mhm.
And I mean, in the States, most private schools, they're special schools. I mean, usually,
What do you mean by special?
they say you get a higher education.
So they
Or
teach
faster
some
education.
subjects,
But they teach the same
things.
I mean, when you actually go, they teach the same things. But usually, the big difference is that because private schools pay more, you have, I guess, a better qualified teacher, and you have smaller classes. So it's just easier to deal with the kids, and the kids get, I guess, more hands-on, one-on-one teaching, and then it's more difficult in a public school because there's so many kids. I mean, especially when you go to high school, most high schools, there are at least 1,500, if not 2,000 or more kids in high school. It's just huge. And so there's really no student-teacher interactions. It's just a factory. Kids come in, kids go out, kids come in, kids go out. And so that's the one nice thing about private schools, at least in the States, is that they are smaller. And so the teacher can actually help the kids. And I mean, the kids get more, it's not even a better, I guess the kids don't get a better education, but they get,
More personal attention.
yeah, more personal attention. Yeah. And teachers understand and know the kid.
Closer, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but that's really the big difference. And then, when it comes to most private schools in the States, they're usually religious. They're either very Catholic or very Jewish. And so when you go to these, there's always this religious side. And they
Do they teach a
Yeah.
special subject?
Yeah. The school that I went to was Catholic. And I mean,
What did you have to do?
you just have a religious class, and they teach you about God, and they teach you,
How to pray?
they teach you how to be a good Christian. And
Did it
I
help
mean, no. I mean, that's the irony of these classes is that it actually makes you less religious. but personally I'm not, I mean, I guess I'm religious, but I'm not a religion. I believe that there are other things in this world, but I don't believe I should be forced to
go to the church.
Yeah. And to listen to this book that not God wrote, but somebody else. But yeah, but most private schools in the States, they're religious, either Jewish or Catholic. Is that, do you have this in Russia? Religious private schools? No.
Not Jewish.
There are some private schools, religious schools.
Yeah, but I mean, like, do they only teach religion, or they teach everything? They teach everything.
We
Yeah.
also have Sunday schools.
Sundays,
Yeah.
yes.
That's different.
Sundays, religious schools.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
Do your school children have to wear uniform?
Usually no. Private schools, most private schools, yes. In private school, you
And
do.
each private school
Different
chooses
uniform.
by
Yeah.
itself.
And then that's another ridiculous thing of private schools is you have to pay for the uniform. And so it makes it more difficult to go to a private school because uniforms are usually very expensive. And I mean, in public school, most public schools, no uniforms. I think, and then because like I said, with each state you have different curriculums and you have different rules, but then usually in the bigger cities, they force the kids to wear uniforms just to show them how to be proper. Because in the big cities you have the very poor, usually African American or Hispanic, and most of them at the age of 13 will join a gang, and at the age of 15 will stop going to school. So they try and teach them to be civilized.
It used to just be a reading and math / science section, but then they added a writing section as well. So, like, do Russian students have to take any exams? Like, I assume that's what языка is. Okay. What are the sections included on языка?
Reading, writing, listening,
It depends on the subject.
I mean,
Oh, what
English,
subjects are they
composition.
offered? Is that just for English?
No,
English, maths, Russian,
Biology.
almost all subjects. Biology,
Okay.
9 subjects.
computer studies.
Do students have to take all 9?
No, no.
Okay.
There are 2 obligatory.
Yes, 2 of them.
And
Russian and math.
optional.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. And so based on these, based on the scores of языка, does that determine where a student can go to, or like go to university? Okay. What's the highest score you can get on the языка?
100.
Okay. Oh, that's such an easy system. None of this 36 or 1500 or, wow, that's fantastic. All right, any questions? Okay.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
You said that you could learn only German, Italian, or French.
Spanish, French, and German.
How about Russian?
There are not enough people who speak Russian in the United States. At this point, most schools, I think I can safely say all schools offer Spanish because I think, well, about in the next 10 years, the United States will probably be bilingual in both English and Spanish. Some high schools do offer like less common languages like Russian or Japanese or Mandarin, something like that. But these are typically very, very rich schools, and they're also schools that have a specialization. And like they're kind of, you know, special for being like the school that offers Russian. So people will specifically send their students there to learn Russian. But yeah, like I said, there's basically just not enough people in the US who speak Russian, and Americans who do speak Russian, they're in high demand.
Really? What about your Russian?
My Russian's not bad, but yeah, I guess just to give you an idea, the United States government has a list of 7 languages that they call critical languages. So that means that they are an area of interest to the United States right now, either in intelligence capacity or humanitarian capacity, and it means that they do not have a lot of people in the US who are able to speak them, not fluently, but at an advanced level. Russian is one of these languages, along with Mandarin Chinese, Farsi, Arabic, Korean, a dialect of Indian, and what's the final one? I can't remember what well, no, that's all 6. So, yeah. United States likes people who can speak Russian, and Russian is incredibly difficult to learn, even more difficult to master, so it's very hard to find people who are able to sort of be functional in Russian.
So we can go and teach Russian there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, I know that there are areas of New York where they offer Russian in high school, as well as parts of Florida, and I think there's a certain, California as well, and there's also a part of, I think it's somewhere in the Midwest in the United States, I can't remember, but for some reason there are large Russian populations there, so they will offer Russian in high school there. It's the same with Korean. Sometimes you will see Korean in high schools where there's a very large Korean population. Actually in Ohio and Cincinnati, close to where I'm from, it's a city in the southern part of the state, there's a large Korean population, and there's 2 high schools there that offer Korean, but they are the only 2. So if parents want their students to learn Korean and they live an hour away, by public transport, they just have to take their student there in order to learn. It's something that's going to be really specialized by the area.
Do you know anything about Russian history?
Yes, I learned at university though.
And from your school, yes?
The only history I learned was American history. And like I said, I didn't really learn anything that happened after we learned about the moon landing. But I think that was just because I'm from Ohio. Neil Armstrong is actually from Ohio as well. And that's why we learned about that, because he's sort of an Ohio hero. But yeah, I didn't really learn any European history, no South American history. I studied Russian history in university, and also because I studied Spanish, I studied some Spanish history and history of Central and South America. But that's not something that you'll find in a typical American high school. I don't know, maybe that's just because we're, America's the best, so let's learn about America. But honestly, I find it really interesting because living here, the United States is so young compared to Russia. I mean, my country is basically as old as Gustin Dvor, which just, it's one of my favorite reasons to go there. It's like, yes. So I can understand why some, most people who are not from the United States say that the United States has no history. But, we do focus on that. We also focus a lot on how our government works, which I do think is important. And I also think, do typical Russian students learn just Russian history and European history, or also other regions of the world?
World history.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes. From ancient times through Egyptian and
Oh, wow.
Rome and all
Middle Ages.
Middle Ages, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, we did a little bit about the Middle Ages, but everything I learned about Egyptian history I learned on
they
my own.
studied ancient times.
Mm-hmm.
Then they studied Roman time. Then Middle Ages, for example.
Yeah.
In the 7th or 8th grade, I don't remember.
Okay, oh wow.
And in the 11th, they studied world history, the history of Russia.
Yeah.
The World War. Right.
Yeah, very interesting.
Part.
Yeah, World War II is usually the unit that most students look forward to, because that's like the most, again, I graduated high school 6 years ago, I think, I don't even remember. But that was like at least when I was in high school, that was the big thing. Like everyone was really excited about the World War II unit, because that was typically the most recent history that we got. But yeah, current events we sometimes covered in social studies classes. Not very often though. I mean, I think compared to most Russian students, American students are less informed about like current world issues, current places of interest to the United States and things like that. Okay,
How many lessons a day do they have, the children have?
Usually 7 or 8.
And the lesson, 45 minutes or
16.
Yeah, usually 45 or 50 minutes, then with probably 3 minutes in between classes. You also have a lunch break at a certain time. Elementary students will get recess where they're able to go outside and play. Middle school and high school don't. In high school, you can have what's called a study hall, which basically means that for one of your academic periods during the day, we call them periods, you don't have to have a class and you can do your homework. Most of my friends just played card games or played on the computer or something. So they're able to take a break that way, but other than that, it's really just lunch is the only break during the day. It's usually half an hour for lunch.
At what time does it usually finish?
It depends. My high school ended around 2:45, 3 o'clock. Some places will end as late as 4 o'clock. In most school districts, the elementary school will start the latest, and high school will start the earliest. So when I was in high school, our lessons started at 7:30, and middle school it started around 8 o'clock, 8:15, and then elementary school started at 9. And that's mostly because in my town and in most towns in the United States, there's free bus transportation for all students to get to school. And because of the bus schedule, they can't have all the schools start at the same time because they don't want kindergartners on the same bus as 18-year-old high school students. That's just asking for problems. Do they offer anything like a bus service in Russia? I mean, obviously not here because this is a bigger city, but...
In villages,
Okay,
they have school buses.
okay.
Not in cities.
Yeah, I mean, I figure again, just because it's such a big city and it seems like most parents want to take their kids to school and then pick them up as well. But, yeah, do most of the schools start at the same time?
Most.
Okay,
Most start at 9.
okay.
But we at 8:30.
Yeah, that sounds so much better than 7:30. That really, I do remember that about going to high school. That was, I was suffering.
What was your favorite subject in school?
My favorite subject was Spanish. I loved to study foreign languages. I didn't have a lot of opportunity to do it, which is why I ended up studying languages in university. But my school actually had a very good Spanish program. It was small. One of our teachers was an immigrant from Cuba, and another one was a guy who spent a lot of time in South America, and so he was, he was fluent, he knew exactly what he was doing, but to me that was the most interesting, and it was kind of unfortunate because there wasn't a whole lot of emphasis placed on that where I grew up. And even now, I still love studying languages. I'm still studying Russian and trying to learn how to navigate it. It's incredibly difficult. I'm very envious that you guys can already speak it already. All right, and are there any more questions, or can I go ahead and move on?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
For the second part, I wanted to discuss the different types of high schools that we have. In the United States, we have 3 main types of high schools: public, private, and homeschooling. Public high school is the most common. It's also the hardest to define. Public high school in the United States can be a school in inner city New York that is overcrowded, has problems with crime and teenage pregnancy where they're not effective, but they can also include very wealthy school districts where students are able to study languages like Russian and Chinese. They're able to gain entrance to Ivy League universities like Harvard and Yale, and they're very, very good places to send your children to study. So it's kind of hard to talk about a typical public high school. One thing that all public high schools have in common is that they are funded by taxes. These taxes are typically local taxes. Sometimes they are state and federal taxes. But the biggest source of income is going to be local taxes. The curriculum that's typically dictated in public schools is determined by a national bill that we have, called No Child Left Behind. Has anyone heard of this before? This was a bill that was signed in 2001 by President George W. Bush. Basically, its aim was to monitor students' progress a little bit more closely. We do this through standardized testing, and these standardized tests are taken every couple of years. Depending on how well students do on these tests, that will determine how much government money they get. Again, this is how it works in a nutshell. There has been a lot of people in the United States either love No Child Left Behind or they hate it. There is no middle ground. The main positive effect of this has been that test scores have risen all over the country. I think 5 years ago, among 9-year-olds, their reading level was the highest that it's been in 28 years. So people are seeing a lot of, students are showing results. The main criticism of No Child Left Behind is that teachers are essentially teaching to the test, which means they know what's going to be on the exam, so they only spend time doing that. The main focus of these standardized tests are reading and science and math, so teachers spend their time doing that. And as a result, elective programs such as music, physical education, health, different classes like these are usually the first programs to go, because school districts aren't going to get money if they have gifted students who are very gifted musically or gifted in theater. They're going to get money for the students that are good at science and good at math. So teachers aren't able to have as much freedom to teach what they want. There is no national standard of how well students have to do. Again, it's determined by state. So like I said, this is the most common form of education in the United States. And like I said, it is difficult to sort of define what a typical public school is, because it will range from these really poor, horrible inner city schools where nothing is accomplished to incredibly wealthy districts. There was a public school close to where I grew up. My parents were thinking about moving to this area called Oakwood, and it was a very prestigious school. They consistently sent students to Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. They scored very, very high on state standard exams. They had very good teachers. They had fantastic resources for everyone at the school. But it was located in a very wealthy area of the city, and that is why they were able to get more money and have more opportunities. So, yeah, I already said that. Okay. So yes, the next one are private schools. Private schools are very common in the United States, but again, they're not nearly as common as public education. But most people I know have been to a private school at some point in their educational career. Unlike public schools, private schools are funded solely by tuition. So as a result, they are able to teach whatever they want. They don't have to pay attention to the guidelines of No Child Left Behind. They don't have any sort of authority to answer to for money, so they're able to be a bit more specific in their types of education. But they do have a national standard of education that they still have to answer to. They just don't have to do it for money. The main benefit of private institutions is that they do offer significantly smaller classes and more specialized teachers. Most teachers who work for most private schools will help with tuition for any teacher who wants to continue their study. So for example, if there's a math teacher who wants to pursue their master's degree in a type of mathematics, these private schools will help pay for it. Most private schools also have a specific focus. This is typically where you will find your bilingual or multilingual schools, your religious schools, schools that focus on math and science, schools that focus on the performing arts, and things like this. Most private schools are religious though, and they add sort of a religious element to education. Not all of their students are religious. For example, there are many Catholic schools in the United States, but a large percentage of students are not Catholic. They just include a Catholic Mass as part of the school day. In public schools, you are not allowed to mention religion in any way, shape, or form. People get sued over this. It is a very, very big, you just don't do it, ever. But in public school, or private schools, it's okay. Private schools also have a bit more liberty when it comes to discipline. In a public school, it is very hard to permanently expel a student because education is required in the United States, and if this is the only place where a student can go, then they can't be expelled. Private schools are not that way. If there's an unruly student, a disorderly student, they can say, you're done, you're not coming back here ever again. They're also able to offer more services to special needs students. So students with learning disabilities, students who are not native speakers of English, they are typically sent to private schools because they have a lot more resources to help these students with their learning difficulties. All right, and the last one we have, which is the smallest percentage of students, is homeschooling. Less than 3% of American students are homeschooled. But typically in this system, students do not go to any type of school. They stay home and they are taught by their parents or guardians. The only requirement for parents to homeschool their children, they must have a high school diploma themselves, and that's it. Typically, students are homeschooled for religious reasons. For example, do you know who the Amish are? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Amish families will typically homeschool their children because they don't want them to be around, you know, the electronics and the technology. They don't want them learning computer science and things like that, so they feel that it's a better fit for them. It's also a way for parents to use non-traditional approaches to education. For example, in public and private schools, you will typically earn a mark. In Russian, you guys use 1 through 5. In the United States, we use A through F. A being the best, F being the worst, and you need to repeat the material again. There are a lot of parents, especially now, it seems, who feel that having such a clear label is really damaging to students, really damaging to their self-esteem, and prevents them from excelling. So this non-traditional education can include no grades, it can include more physical education, religious education. There are many, many different non-traditional ways to educate a child. Obviously, I will not go into that because there's too many to name. Homeschool is also a way for students to avoid typical pressures in high school. So problems like bullying or drug use, any peer pressures that a normal high school student has to face, homeschooled students don't have that big of a problem. Most states have a system in place to monitor the progress of students, but it does vary from state to state. For example, in Ohio, students are required to take a certain exam every single month. This exam has to be submitted to the person who is in charge of the educational system in the town, and they they monitor their progress. So if there's low progress, they can intervene and say, no, this student has to come back to regular school. If the progress is consistent, they say, okay, you can keep homeschooling your student. But it is monitored very closely until students graduate high school. Students are also able to study year-round. So if they don't want to take a summer vacation and if they want to keep working, they can. There is, unlike public and private schools, homeschooling is typically the most criticized. The National Education Association is the largest union of teachers in the United States, and they are very, very vocal against homeschooling. Their main criticisms are that there's no way to ensure academic quality, so someone could just be teaching something to their students and they have no idea what they're talking about, and students aren't learning what they should be learning. Also, the lack of socialization is a significant problem. That's one of the most important things they feel in high school, not only in addition to academics. Well, in addition to academics is learning how to interact with your peers, how to work with other people, making friends, things like this. And this is something homeschool students do not have because they're typically by themselves or just with their families. So, any questions so far?
I would like to ask you about teacher's salary. What can you say? What kind of schools are prestige for a teacher's job?
Surprisingly, public schools tend to pay better than private schools, but private schools offer more benefits. So like I said, the tuition reimbursement, they're usually given more vacation time, better health insurance, and things like that. The average salary for a public school teacher, again, it varies from place to place, but I would say between $30,000 and $40,000 a year. Relatively speaking, that is not a lot in the United States. I recently had a conversation with one of my friends about how much a Russian doctor makes, and Russian doctors make, or American doctors make so much more. So, yeah, relatively speaking, it is not a lot. And usually they have to pay, I mean, they are provided health insurance, they're provided vacation time and sick leave, but when it comes to purchasing materials, they usually have to do that on their own. So if you want to do a lesson that's not in the textbook, if you want to, you know, if you're working with elementary students and you want them to have colored pencils and crayons, you have to buy those yourself. So yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
I would like to ask you about homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any controls for the schooling? I mean, the government, do they control homeschooling? Any tests, any public exams?
It's determined by the state, but basically other than taking a periodic exam, that's about it. In Ohio, they are a bit more strict about homeschooling than other states. For example, the superintendent of a school district, you have to fill out a special form basically asking permission to homeschool. So saying like, yes, I want to homeschool my daughter or my son, and they get to make that decision, yes, you can homeschool your kids, or no, they're going to stay in public school. And then based on these periodic exams that they take, they monitor how the student's doing, what they're learning, what they're not learning. And they can, at any point, they can say, no, you need to stop homeschooling and they need to be in a traditional school. But other than that, like when it comes to the material or what subjects have to be covered, they're free to do what they like. You know, if a parent wants to teach their kids about, I don't know, the history of all of the Russian czars, they can.
Do they get any document after such school?
The same as the public school and private school?
No,
or
they
different?
have to go to a high school after homeschooling, yeah?
No, you can be homeschooled through high school.
Also?
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, this is all the way up. This can start at kindergarten and go all the way up to 12th grade. You can earn a high school diploma after being homeschooled.
But what certificate do they get before entering the university?
Do they have the sign, homeschooling?
Yeah.
I think they do. I think that it is labeled as a homeschooled high school diploma. In order to earn a high school diploma in the United States, you do have to cover certain basic courses. Like, for example, there has to be 4 years of math, there has to be 4 years of some sort of English class, 3 years of science. So these qualifications have to be met, and that's how a student has to earn their high school diploma. But I do believe that a homeschooled diploma is different than a regular private school or public school high school diploma. I also don't think you're able to earn any sort of distinction. High school diplomas in the United States, you can get them with honors and highest honors, like the magna cum laude, and I don't think you can get that at a homeschool diploma. But I mean, also too, these students are required to take either the SAT or the ACT if they want to attend university. They're required to. They have the option of taking the PSAT to qualify for the National Merit Scholar Program. So it sort of depends on. Again, it's just much more liberal, and it's much more. You just have much more freedom to do what you want.
What about students' home task?
And compared to homeschool?
That's a big question now in Russia. Yeah, home task in public and private schools.
Typically, there always are, in both public and private schools, there always are some sort of home tasks or homework. It will vary depending on what the subject is. Basically, it just varies on the teacher. For example, I went to a public high school. When I was in high school, I had teachers who, they'd assign me a homework, like a homework assignment, and I'd do it, and they'd look at it, just, okay, you did it, check. You get your credit for today. But I had a chemistry teacher who, she would actually take our assignments, go home and grade them, go through line by line. We would get a grade as a result of that, and our homework. And yeah, and then our homework assignments were a significant part of our final grade of the course. So there's not really a set standard of what you have to do and what you don't have to do. It's up to the teacher, but homework is still very common, and it's still typically a very important part of a student's grade. I had classmates who, instead of earning a 4, like the equivalent of a 4, they earned a 3 because they didn't do homework. But then the problem that comes in there too is that, I don't know if this is the same in Russia or not, but at this point, parents are not holding students accountable for their education, but they're holding the teachers accountable. So if parents send their students to a private school and they're paying a lot of money and the student is not doing well, their first reaction is, you're not teaching my kid the right way. So if the student is lazy, if the student just doesn't understand, it's not their fault, it's the teacher's fault. Because the teacher didn't teach them the right way, the teacher isn't trying hard enough. Is this a similar problem in Russia?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, private schools will have a bigger problem with that than public schools. Because, like I said, there are very good public schools out there. I'm a public school graduate, and I scored very well on my SAT. I went to a very good university. My university gave me a lot of money to study there. But they do still have that stigma of being a public school. Like, oh, you're public. Okay, anybody can do that. So, but like I said, in these situations, public schools especially, it's up to the students and their families to get the most out of the experience. If you have families or parents that are really involved in their students' lives, making sure they do their homework, helping with them with their homework, getting them to and from school on time, they are ultimately going to be the most successful students. And the parents who don't care, who let their kids slack off, who let them, skip school because they are tired and they don't want to go, those are going to be the students who don't do as well.
And what about after-classes activities?
They're very, very common in both public and private schools, and high school especially. There are sports teams, You can get involved with theater program, you can get involved in music, either join a choir or join a band. There are lots of volunteer organizations for students as well. They can, ranging from, geez.
But do we have to pay for that?
Now, yes. Again, it varies from school district to school district. But, for example, in my high school, when I was in 11th grade, our taxes, the taxes went down, so the school did not have as much money, and as a result, we had to pay for anything extra. So joining a sports team, I also had to pay to do theater. But, yeah, high school students are American high school students are insanely busy. Typically, they have, a full day of classes, and after school will be sports practice or play practice. And maybe they'll go home and do something, have dinner and maybe relax for an hour. Then after that, it's something else, whether
maybe
it's...
because their parents are ready to pay for the education. Because in Russia, parents, they're not ready to pay for the children.
Well, maybe you can
for anything, yeah,
maybe you all can explain this to me. I was actually just speaking with my colleague about this. All high schools in Russia are now private, yes? There was a law passed that you have to pay for school now.
No.
Is it okay?
No. There are several private schools in Russia. Several. For example, in St. Petersburg, we have not less than 10.
Okay.
And their parents pay for everything. And they have native speakers, and they teach them English, and they have sport teams, everything.
Yeah.
And they go abroad, so we understand. And we do not have paid lessons.
Okay.
If only some parents make a group and say, please, we will pay for school.
Extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
And they are always after classes activities.
Yeah. Okay. And these are in the private high schools? Or all of them? Private and public?
Private and public.
Okay.
In private school, you pay for everything, and in the public school, you pay just for these extracurricular activities and after classes activities. If you want, of course. Of course, if you want, because most of parents don't want to pay for anything.
Yeah, well, we had the same problem. There were some parents who they would pay, but they would complain about it. Just, why should I pay for this? And they played football last year, we didn't have to pay. But eventually they did pay, and they stopped complaining, and the student was able to do what they wanted. But, it is more common, private schools, pretty much everything, since you are paying tuition, pretty much everything will be included. You don't have to pay any extra. In public schools, it's just now starting to increase. But private high schools will do the trips abroad, public high schools will not. It is very rare to find a public high school that has a strong enough Spanish program or French program where there's students who actually want to go and study in Spain for a week or go to France and speak French for a week. Because from what I gather, at least, it seems that at least the high schools that we work with, they all have programs to send their students abroad. Because I think school 11, you guys are planning a trip to the UK in May or March?
We were in Germany.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
In Germany and
Australia?
in Australia and in Finland.
Oh, okay.
We don't have a special program with the UK yet.
Okay. What about School 35? Do you guys have any special abroad programs for your students?
No.
Okay. Well, there's the Leeds English program that Ekaterina Alexandrovna will tell you about later. So, okay. Is there anything close to a homeschooling program in Russia?
Yeah.
Not high school.
Yeah, not high school, but
Not high.
in
Primary
middle school.
Primary school sometimes.
And middle school. homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
But not parents are the teachers for these children. The teachers from public school or private school have to go to children and to teach them materials.
Okay, interesting. Well, I guess as Russian teachers, how do you feel about this, like a homeschooling program? Do you think it's good for students?
It depends on a child, and of course they usually have some health problems, health diseases if they choose homeschooling.
Okay.
That's why it's better for them to study at home.
Okay.
And after they solving these health diseases, health problems, they usually come back to normal school, normal classes.
Okay, so that's the main reason for homeschooling in Russia is just illness?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not always, not. Some pupils nowadays, some children study at home, but they are the members of some public school.
Okay.
Their parents want to teach them at home, but they are the members of the public school.
Okay. What about when it comes to non-traditional education? Are there any... Is that very common in Russia at this point? Okay. Most parents just believe in, you go to school and then you go to high school and then you're done. Okay, very good. Well, that is all I have for you. Are there any more questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, yeah.